Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boy, does it smell good.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
That's good.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city. On this Thursday, we're working towards the weekend. That means we're brought to you by Rouse's Markets. Got Jacob Beck and Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos, fired up here with us for the next couple of hours. Luke Johnson, 15 minutes from right now, talking Saints as they get ready to go to L.A. to face the Chargers. A lot of Saints returned to practice yesterday. We'll get a sense of what that means for the black and gold coming up in 15 minutes. Gets it on three. I looked at the hiring cycle of 2021 entering 2022 and regraded those hires. Brian Kelly, of course, was one of those. LSU was very much in that coaching, hiring carousel, and we'll talk about what that looks like now 2.5 years later. Best win, worst loss of the weekend coming up. Travis Brown, Bryan College Station Eagles, going to be with us 1 hour from right now. He covers Texas A&M, always good enough to join us when LSU and A&M get together in football, basketball, or baseball. Voice the Tigers, Chris Blair at 2:15. And I thought some interesting comments. Today's Thursday. That'll have been Tuesday from Sage Ryan of LSU that we'll dive into at 2:30. So plenty to get to here on this Thursday. And once again, we are fired up. You are with us. That's all right. Get started.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
One of the big storylines in this football game between LSU and Texas A&M is going to be Texas A&M's ability to run the football. It is their identity on offense. And quite frankly, I realize I have the information leading up to the opinion making, but you can kind of tell that Colin Klein, a Kansas State guy, is running this Texas A&M offense because it's got some Kansas State vibes. They're in the shotgun. It's not always a work of art. I wouldn't call it extremely precise, but I would call it physical. I would call it productive. I would call it steady at this point in the season. Yeah, the quarterback has made some mistakes. I don't know that that's completely foreign to Kansas State football, but it's not an offense that's littered with NFL guys. They don't have Mike Evans. They don't have Christian Kirk. I don't even know if they have Devon Achane at this point. They don't have Evan Stewart. It's not a star-studded group of players. They certainly don't have Johnny Manziel. But they've been pretty good. They've won, as we've mentioned, 3 of their 4 SEC games by double digits. They've run the ball really, really well, and that's going to be the identity of the offense, and that's kind of what you figure when you talk to a Kansas State football fan. That's what it kind of looks like. They're not going to have a lot of pros, but they're going to produce, and they're going to win a lot of games. And so the question is, how does LSU's run defense match up against Texas A&M's run offense? Let's talk about the Aggie run offense first. They're second in the SEC in yards per game. They lead the Southeastern Conference in yards per carry. When they run the football, they average better than 5 yards per carry. Le'Veon Moss and Amari Daniels are the bell cow backs. I think most of you are familiar with Moss. He's an Estruma product from right here in Baton Rouge. There's an interesting little caveat there that Texas A&M's running back is from the backyard of LSU in Baton Rouge, and LSU's running back Caden Durham is from the Dallas area, which not quite as close to Texas A&M, but still he's a Texas kid, and they'll be facing off against each other in this game. But Moss is 6 feet tall, 215 pounds. He hit a home run against Missouri, 75-yard touchdown. I don't know if I would call him an elite speed back. I would call him a balanced back who's done a really good job this year. Against Notre Dame, he carried it 20 times for 70 yards. Against Florida, he averaged 6.1 yards per carry, went over 100 yards in that game, 110. Against Arkansas, 9 yards a carry in that game. He went over 100 yards in that game, 117 on just 13 carries. In that one. Against Missouri, he had the 75-yard touchdown run, so that skewed the numbers a bit, but still 12 carries, 138 yards. A&M ran the ball just fine that day. And last week, not as productive, 65 yards on 17 carries against Mississippi State. He's a good player. And Amari Daniels, a little bit shorter, but still stout back who is averaging 4.5 yards a carry and has 5 touchdowns. It's a 1-2 punch there in the backfield, no matter who the quarterback is, whether it's Marcel Reed or Connor Wigman. A&M wants to run the ball, and they've done a great job of it. Who have they done it against? And that's where you start to get in the question. Florida, A&M ran it up and down the field on them, just absolutely dominated them in the swamp. Florida's the number 15 run defense in a 16-team SEC. Missouri, A&M put on a clinic in that game. Missouri is the 10th best run defense in the SEC, and I would not wager that Missouri has played the toughest schedule in the league to this point. Auburn, sure, A&M on the road, tough game, no doubt. But Boston College, Vanderbilt, not exactly murder's row. Mississippi State, they're the worst run defense in the SEC to this point. Makes sense. They couldn't stop Toledo. Arkansas is number 8. That's the best run defense Texas A&M has played. So is this a function of A&M being really good in the run game? Is this a function of who they played not being very good? Well, that doesn't really matter. What matters is what LSU can do against it. And LSU is the number 9 run defense in the SEC. It's interesting that you can phrase it two different ways. If I told you LSU was the 9th best run defense in the SEC, you would go, well, that's not very good. But if I phrased it a different way and I said LSU's the 32nd best run defense in the country, you go, well, that's not that bad. 30 seconds, firmly in the top quarter. But the SEC's got 8 better run defenses because nobody can run the ball in the SEC in September because you play a bunch of teams that aren't very good. But LSU is 12th in the SEC in yards per carry allowed, just under 4. And you look at some of the better run offenses that LSU's played in the SEC. Ole Miss is 3rd. Arkansas is 4th. And then you got South Carolina, who comes in at 9th. And how did LSU fare against them? And there are so many ways you can play with these numbers. And I think y'all know the story, so I'm not going to play any tricks on you here. I'm just going to tell you what they are, and we'll talk about it. But Ole Miss is 3rd in the conference in rushing offense. They average 200 yards per game. Keep in mind, that does factor in the garbage teams they played early in the season when they scored 77 points on somebody, Murray State or something, whatever. But they average 200 yards per game. They got 180 on LSU, and we're all well aware that 50 of those 180 came on one play, the 4th down run, where they found a crease and hit the home run. South Carolina gashed LSU on the ground for 243 yards rushing. Now, 2 of them came on 65-plus yard plays, but still, you're talking about a lot of rushing yards, 243. And then you got Arkansas, who's 4th in the SEC in rushing, and LSU held them to 38 yards on the ground. So how should I massage these numbers? How should I talk about it? Should I say, well, hey, Ole Miss, Ulysses Bentley, 50-yard touchdown run. Take that out. Ole Miss didn't run it great. South Carolina busted 2 big ones. Rocket Sanders off left end, Lenora Sellers right up the gut. And if you take those out, South Carolina, fine day on the ground. Or should you say, well, LSU's gotten gashed for over 180 yards against 2 of these teams that can run the ball, and A&M statistically runs it better than both of them. I can say either one. Here's what I really feel about the running contest. I feel like A&M runs the ball well. I don't think they're Eddie Lacy's Alabama team behind that offensive line in 2012 that nobody could deal with. They came to Tiger Stadium, Benny Logan, Barkevius Mingo, Sam Montgomery, Freak Johnson, Ego Ferguson, a bunch of guys who played in the NFL couldn't do anything against that line. I don't think this is that for Texas A&M. I think their statistics are a tad inflated based on playing inferior teams. I think if they had Georgia and Tennessee on that schedule instead of Florida and Mississippi State, it looks a lot different. However, I think they've got a good offensive line and a good veteran tailback. I think they run the ball pretty well. I think LSU is markedly better against the run than they were against South Carolina and Nichols at that point in the season. And I think A&M will have some success running the ball. I do not believe they will run for 196 yards in this game. I think that number settles somewhere closer to 130 yards, unless LSU gives up the massive play. And that is where this thing kind of shakes out. I think if LSU forces A&M to continue to plod down the field, play by play by play, you've got a better chance of Connor Wigman making a mistake. Whether that mistake is an errant throw for a pick, an errant throw for an incompletion, whether it allows LSU's pass rush to get home one time or two, whether it's just a missed read. The more LSU puts it in the hands of Connor Wigman and out of the hands of Le'Veon Moss, the better. And the only way to do that is to make A&M keep coming back. And if you give up a 65-yard run for a touchdown or a 48-yard run to put them into the red zone, all of a sudden you eliminate that possibility. I think LSU's run defense is fine. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's elite. I don't think it's atrocious. I think it's fine. I think A&M's run offense is good. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's elite. And I think they're going to lean on it a lot in this game. Colin Klein does not want Connor Wigman coming out ripping 16-yard out routes. He wants Le'Veon Moss getting 6 yards a carry. Greg Penn, Whit Weeks, Major Burns, and those tackles who never show up on the stat sheet but are allowing the linebackers to roam, those guys have got to step up for LSU. If you slow down the running game, which teams have not done, they have not, then you've got a real chance. If you don't, it's going to be a long night. That's probably a cliche-riddled analysis at the end there, because everybody who runs the ball great generally wins the game. You control time of possession. You tire out the defense. You get into short third downs. Like, all that happens when you do things like that. But this is so much the identity of this Texas A&M offense. They have to run the ball. That'll be an emphasis for LSU. It's just a question of whether or not they can do it. If what they did last week is an indication, they're going to be in really good shape. If what they did at South Carolina or Nichols is the indication, well, not good. It's a huge, huge part of the game. I think A&M feels great they'll be able to do it. I think LSU's certainly blossoming with some confidence at this point, but it's a prove-it spot. I feel a little bit like the Arkansas side of things here, although A&M's, I think, a step up from Arkansas. But the more I look at this game, the more I analyze it, I don't feel like I normally feel when LSU plays one of the top teams in the SEC. I think A&M's roster is not quite there. Now, jury's very much still out on where LSU's offense is, and where their personnel is, if they're an elite team in the SEC. And I think we learned that on Saturday. But just breaking it down as the week goes on. That's our opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge. When we come back, Luke Johnson talking Saints, the Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Speaking of Genesis of Baton Rouge, good as time as any to talk about them. Valet maintenance, that's a perk I heard from the folks over at Genesis Baton Rouge. It just sounded so appealing to me because I don't really love sitting in dealerships waiting for them to work on my car. Getting an oil change can be a nuisance. Dealing with your cabin air filter, your wiper blades, getting the tires looked at, it's all can be a nuisance. And you can find yourself sitting in the service center for a while. You're not productive. You're not at work. You can't go get the kids, whatever the case may be. If you're a Genesis Baton Rouge driver, you don't have to worry about that. They've got valet maintenance. And for 3 years, they've got complimentary maintenance on all their lines of vehicles at Genesis of Baton Rouge. So you drive to work, they come pick your car off. They drop you off in a car, so you've got one for the day. They handle what they need to handle with your vehicle, bring it right on back to you. You never miss a beat. Fantastic perk of driving a Genesis of Baton Rouge, and there are lots of those. Genesis is a luxury line right there on Airline at PQ. If you're in the market for a new vehicle, just give them a shot. Get on by Genesis of Baton Rouge and see what they've got to offer you. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Every single car on their lot is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. That's Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
Welcome in. Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, presented by Rouse's Markets. We are cruising along, working towards the weekend. Rouse is the official supermarket of the New Orleans Saints. They got an incredible deal going on at Rouse's this week. Look, USDA Prime Beef Boneless Whole Ribeyes for $10.99 a pound. That's a savings of $9 a pound. You're basically getting half off whole boneless ribeyes. That's fantastic stuff. I know one guy who knows his way around a ribeye. That's Luke Johnson, who covers the New Orleans Saints. Joins us now on Jim's Firearms Hotline. Luke, can we get you into Rouse's for a ribeye?
You can, and you and I can like reminisce about the good old days of the drover. You know.
Oh man, got to get back to Omaha. That's really the issue here. Is that LSU's got to get right on back to Omaha so we can get back there. I'm not sure. Did the Saints get anything done at practice yesterday? There were so many players on the field. I'm not sure how they would function.
Yeah, it was a sight for sore eyes. Like I'm ready to not watch like a preseason lineup take the field for a regular season NFL game. So it was honestly like a lot of really good news for the Saints. The guy you'd really hope to have back most, maybe Derek Carr wasn't back out there, and Dennis Allen said after the practice that he's kind of not anticipating that Derek's going to be back this week. But you are talking about getting potentially Chris Olave back. I think Cesar Ruiz will be back. I think Taysom Hill will be back. I think Lucas Patrick will be back. That's 4 starters. It's a third of your offense that you're getting back. So, a lot of really good news. And you got Pete Werner back on the other side of the ball. So I just think that the long break really did him some good.
Clearly, my focus there is on Lucas Patrick and Cesar Ruiz in the middle of that offensive line, because without a running game, you're just not going to give Spencer Rattler much of a chance. How much more confidence do you have in the Saints' ability to run the ball with those two guys back in the lineup?
I mean, a lot more. Obviously, like you want Eric McCoy back in there, but I think Connor McGovern's been fine at center. And when you start adding guys with a lot of NFL experience, guys who've played really good football this year back to the starting lineup, I just think it makes the whole thing stronger. And if their running game gets a little bit better, then their passing game looks a lot better, and their protection looks a lot better. It is like such a key component to their offense, and I think it's going to look a little better this weekend. Granted, like the Chargers are a really tough defense. I didn't realize this until today, but they're leading the NFL in scoring defense. They're top 10 in pass and run defense. They're pretty stingy, but they also they like are second in the NFL in the percentage of snaps they're playing like light boxes. Like they're gettable. So it's kind of really paramount for this offense to get that going again, so they can get like literally everything else they want to do going.
What'd you like from Spencer Rattler last week?
Last week?
Yeah.
I like the fact that you get to just like flush that game and forget it existed. I mean, it was such a bad situation he was dropped into. You're playing behind almost a completely backup offensive line, playing without your top 2 receivers. They just had no chance against like a very good Broncos defense. So like there wasn't really anything that you could point back to from that game and say I like that. But I did think he looked really good in like spurts in the first game. I think it's way too early to like bail on him as a prospect. So I'd expect a better performance from him this week, especially getting some of these guys back. And I do think that he's a really poised player. I think he gives them some elusiveness and mobility in the pocket. So I think that we'll see something better from him this week, assuming he's going to start. But last week, I don't think there's anything that you can take away from that as positive.
Who's he going to throw the ball to outside of Olave?
So I wouldn't expect like Marquez Valdez-Scantling to play like Rashid Shaheed number of snaps, but I think he's going to be out there and running some of those vertical routes and creating some space with his speed. Outside of that, the fact of the matter is they have to get some of these other guys involved. They have to get Juwan Johnson to be a part of this passing game. We've been saying that for 2 years now. Who knows if it's ever going to happen? But they got to try. Because the nice things you've seen out of Bub Means, some of these other guys, it's just it's not really good enough, And I also want to see them try to get Kendre Miller involved in like the screen game and stuff like that. I think that was a really nice part of his game in his rookie season. He didn't get like a lot of opportunities there, but like the few that he did, he looked really comfortable running that sort of stuff. I think that can give him some like easy shots to kind of get into the flow and rhythm of the game, and see where that takes him.
Well, we're on the offense. We might as well just stick with Kamara here. What do you think about the contract extension, the numbers, and the type of player that he can be for those 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, like I get like some of the criticism of it, mainly from the standpoint of like this team is short on resources and committing 2 more years to a player who's going to be in his early 30s by the time the end of the contract is over. Like I understand that, but I think some of the stuff about like 30-year-old running backs is getting kind of proven to be overblown at this point. I think teams are smarter about how they manage these guys younger in their careers, and they're getting into their 30s playing at a higher level than they did 5 years ago. I mean, Derrick Henry's on pace for a 2,200-yard season right now. Aaron Jones is having a really, really nice season for the Minnesota Vikings. He's 30 years old. Raheem Mostert set a career high in rushing last year at 31. Like it's possible for guys to play well into their 30s. And I think Alvin has played really, really well this season outside of the games where he's just been in this terrible situation. So it has to be right around him. There's a criticism to be made there. It's not like he's going to take over a game, but when the situation is right, he's still a special player. And then when you look at, I mean, if they would have released him next year, which is like what would have happened, that last year the contract was never going to happen. He's going to count the same against the cap next year that he would have if he was released. So like you're essentially getting him for free next year, right? Like you're getting the player at the cost that it would have costed to not have him on the team. So like I have absolutely no problem with it. And, just speaking personally, like it's nice having somebody like Alvin to talk to in the locker room. Like he keeps it real. And he's like a fun guy to cover.
That part's inarguable. He's been so refreshing, both just in the media and then just the way he's handled this entire thing. It's been incredible. In this day and age, it's just incredibly rare to have a guy in a contract dispute that's going out there and with busted ribs and getting destroyed and just showing up for work every day. That's been incredibly refreshing from my perspective. All right, let's talk about the defense because they hadn't been that hurt and they're not stopping anybody. So what's the biggest issue?
It's everything. I mean, I think it starts and stops at the run game, right? I think the Saints have only allowed 5 passing touchdowns this year. It's like they're like second or third in the NFL and like the number of passing touchdowns they've allowed, but like their run defense has been atrocious, and everything else is just kind of fallen apart because of it. So like since week 3 in this 5-game losing streak, they've given up 901 rushing yards, 6 yards per carry, 26 explosive runs in 5 games.
Whoa! 26 explosives in 5 games.
Yes.
Jeez Louise.
And look, it's all over the place. Like 2.62 yards before contact per next gen stats. That is worse in the NFL and is on track to be the worst in the NFL by any defense since 2018. You watch some of these explosive plays and like people you expect to make plays like Demario Davis are either missing tackles, they're in the wrong gaps. There was one Bo Nix run where he went 32 yards on a quarterback sweep where like the entire offense is moving in one direction and DeMario for some reason ran to the complete opposite side of the field. It's not good, and it's not good on every level, like the coaching, the pre-snap communication, the execution of the plan after the snap. It's like all been broken. The one thing that I could say is, okay, this is maybe a positive, is like they seem to have recognized that during this long break, during all this self-scouting. I think they really legitimately do have smart defensive coaches, so maybe they can get a fix, because I still think they have the players. But like they got to get that turned around if they're going to be even remotely functional as a defensive unit.
I realize we're talking about essentially 2 different sports, and he wasn't even at this game, but Jim Harbaugh's team last year never threw the ball in the second half of a game and won. So if you don't stop the run, he will run it a lot. And are you figuring that's what you're going to see on Sunday?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I was the Chargers, I'd want to run the ball about 50 times against the Saints defense. And they've got a really good offensive line. They've got some really good young players. Guys who can make a difference against a defensive line that has just frankly not held up its own end of the bargain. So like that's fully what I'm expecting this week, even though they have like a mutant at quarterback who's really, really good. I fully expect Jim Harbaugh to dare them to stop the run and see if they can actually do it.
How do you like their chances on Sunday?
I'm actually feeling a lot better about this one than I have for the last couple of weeks. Just because they're getting a lot of guys back, and then the weapon working in their favor is that they're coming off a long break against a team that played on Monday last week. We saw that impact the Saints against the Bucks when the Saints were on a short week and the Bucks had a long rest, and the Bucks just really took it to them in the second half. I think that's going to benefit New Orleans this weekend. I think the line when it opened up was something crazy like Chargers +7 or -7. I expected at least to be close, and I'm actually feeling much better about the Saints' chances to get a win this week than I have in the last couple of weeks. And look, it's important. Counting this game, their next 6 opponents are a combined 13 and 27 right now. So, like, if the Saints are ever going to make a run, this is the time to do it. They've got a lot of easy opponents on their schedule, and I'm sure a lot of opponents are looking at the Saints being like, okay, we got the 2-5 Saints. That's an easy opponent on our schedule, but, like, this is the time to get it done.
Where's your confidence level? Derek Carr will be back next week.
Yeah, I'm fully anticipating he'll be back next week. Now, this is like something that, again, it's not a pain tolerance issue. It's a functionality issue. But the fact that he's on a throwing program now, and he was listed as doubtful last week, makes me feel like he's much closer. And maybe if it's not this week, I feel like next week is the target.
Sounds good. Enjoy LA. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, buddy.
Luke Johnson at @ByLukeJohnson on Twitter, covers the Saints for The Advocate. Does incredible work. Go check him out online, and he's always with us on Thursdays. If you're looking for Saints content, you can always find ours at Hunt on Saints on YouTube. Our segment with Luke's there every single week, so you can go ahead and check that out for the Saints and the Chargers coming up on Sunday from Los Angeles. We'll come back, kind of take another look at the coaching carousel that LSU got involved in back in 2021. We'll do that coming up next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. To a lot of people, any sort of renovation or remodel is just overwhelming and they don't even want to take that first step. Well, the first step's free. So go to OneBathAndClosets.com and just talk to David Duvall and his team and see what they can do for you. A lot of folks are in homes that have had those big jacuzzi-style tubs. They take those out all the time if you don't use them and put in walk-in showers that are gorgeous, improve the value of your home. They are different functionally, and they're different aesthetically from the look that you've currently got. If you've got one of those narrow showers that you don't really like and you want one of those walk-in showers, you can turn one of those narrow showers into a closet and have the shower where the tub used to be. Those type of things are what David Duvall and his team do all the time. Start the process at OneBathAndClosets.com. If you're worried about paying for things, they've got financing available. 18 months, 0% if you qualify. It's all at One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
We know that right after college football season, the silly season ensues. Recruiting, coaching hires. And there was an interesting question posed to Andy Staples in his mailbag on On3. It was from a guy named Trenton. It said, who are the best and worst hires in the 2022 offseason following the 2021 season? And so Andy Staples went back and said, no, that's interesting. Let's look at it. So he's got them into different categories. Currently looking great. Here for a good time, not for a long time. Ask again after this Saturday. Hanging in and looking bleak. 5 categories there. And LSU was in the mix here. And I didn't remember that all of these names were names that were in the mix when LSU made its move to hire Brian Kelly. But Kelly, as you would expect, after winning the SEC West in year one, producing a Heisman winner last year, and having LSU in the top 10 and atop the SEC for the moment right now, currently looking great. Seems like it's a fair place to put him, and he does fall into that spot. But who else in that hiring circle does he have currently looking great? And I didn't remember all these guys were available because we got so keyed in on Lane Kiffin and Lincoln Riley around here, and then there was some Mel Tucker, and like the whole time, it didn't feel like it grew to like 6, 7, 10 names. It felt like it was fairly short. Now Brian Kelly wasn't on anybody's list, but I didn't recall talking about a lot of these names, and then here we are, and they were in that hiring cycle, and Staples thinks they're doing great. Dan Lanning at Oregon was in that cycle. He was Georgia's defensive coordinator, and obviously he's got things cooking up there at Oregon right now. They're recruiting at an elite level. They finally won a big game against Ohio State, so things look good there. He's got Mario Cristobal in this, and certainly that name didn't come up here at LSU, but he was a disaster for a couple of years at Miami because of the on-field coaching gaffes, not taking a knee against Georgia Tech, all that. But he continued to recruit. They worked the transfer portal. They went and got Cam Ward, who has saved them on 2 occasions this year. And now you've got an undefeated Miami team that's very much in the thick of things to win the ACC, get a bye in the playoff, and compete for a national championship. Whether or not you think Miami's going to win the national championship this year, that's kind of irrelevant. They're in the mix, and so he's got them right there. Rhett Lashley was hired in that cycle, and that certainly wasn't a name that was going to come up at LSU, but he's been hired at SMU, and they're playing great. Every Tuesday we talk about the college football playoff picture. SMU's in it. They're an ACC team. They're towards the top of the ACC. They don't have any more ranked teams left on their schedule. Lashley has done a great job. Some other names that were hired in that cycle are Kalen DeBoer, Mike Elko, and John Sumrall. But it was DeBoer at Washington, Elko at Duke, and Sumrall at Troy. Now DeBoer has parlayed that into the Bama job. Elko's parlayed it into Texas A&M job, and Sumrall has taken the Troy job and then went to Tulane. So all those guys were good hires. They elevated the programs that they were at. He's got Marcus Freeman, who we know was in that hiring circle because LSU fans wanted Marcus Freeman to come to LSU the year before that to be the defensive coordinator, and then potentially with Brian Kelly to be the defensive coordinator. Instead, Notre Dame handed him the keys to the car, and it's been interesting for Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. You lose to Marshall, you lose to Northern Illinois. Stanford was terrible a couple of years ago, and they lost to them, but they did win in College Station this year. And they're in the mix right now. Now, he needs to beat Navy this weekend. You can't lose to a service academy and Northern Illinois in the same year. That makes you a failure in that year at Notre Dame. But they're in the mix right now. Guys he's got is hanging in from that hiring cycle. Sonny Dykes, which is wild because in Sonny Dykes' first year at TCU, they rode the magic carpet to the final. Now, they got embarrassed there, but I don't think anybody at TCU felt bad about that. They thought that was great. What we're learning is that he probably inherited a pretty good situation. He got a quarterback to play over his head, and they won every close game and found their way into the semifinal where they got Michigan to turn it over 4 times. So it's not going awesome at TCU now. You look at the situation, but they did have a really high there with Sonny Dykes. Tony Elliott at Virginia, whatever. Brent Pry at Virginia Tech, losing to Vanderbilt, looked terrible at the time. Doesn't look as bad now. And they're playing a little bit better these days. So I still kind of look at Virginia Tech and I go, isn't there more there? Like, there are good players in Virginia. You can recruit like Pennsylvania and Georgia from there. And you ought to be able to field a pretty good program in a mediocre conference. And Virginia Tech's kind of been middling to this point. But Brent Pry, okay. And then Joey McGuire at Texas Tech has been fine. But the more interesting names outside of Virginia Tech, Texas Tech, Virginia, I don't really care about those. The ones he's got in looking bleak from this hiring cycle, because these are names that theoretically you could have looked at for the LSU job, and we thought potentially that LSU did. That's Lincoln Riley, Billy Napier, and Brent Venables were all hired in the same coaching cycle that Brian Kelly was at LSU. And right now, Lincoln Riley is a failure. He brought his quarterback from Oklahoma, who won the Heisman Trophy, and they were on the doorstep of getting to the college football playoff, a 4-team college football playoff in year 1. You're going, okay, he'll get better defensive players there. He'll continue to recruit quarterbacks. They'll be fine. And then the bottom kind of fell out last year with Caleb Williams on the team, and they've lost 4 league games already in Big Ten play. They've still got to play Notre Dame, and they may lose more. You may talk about 5 or 6 league losses and another one out of conference with Notre Dame. That's atrocious. And at this point, you can start to potentially look at Lincoln Riley and go, yeah, those quarterbacks are pretty good, but what else have you done for me? And there's not a real good answer. Great shootout loss in the Rose Bowl with Baker. Nice Heisman shelf you've got there. But what's the deal? And the more and more I look at that loss LSU suffered in Las Vegas, the more disheartening it is. Because USC's not that good. And I'm not calling LSU elite. I'm not picking LSU to win the national championship. I don't even know if I'm picking LSU to win on Saturday. I hadn't gotten there yet. But you could have won that game. and they just didn't do it. And man, is our conversation about LSU different right now if they find a way to win that game. If Nussmeier just completes that little flip out to Josh Williams, and maybe he turns it up and gets into the end zone, or at least gets a first down and sets up first. It just didn't happen. It's really frustrating. We'll see what Lincoln Riley's future is at USC, but if you're sitting here judging it right now, it doesn't feel that great. Of course, Billy Napier, we know. But Billy Napier was toast when A&M went down there and embarrassed them a couple weeks after Miami embarrassed them. And then all of a sudden, you go to Knoxville and you're competitive, and all of a sudden, you just whitewash Kentucky, and now Florida State looks bad. You got them at the end. We were kind of penciling that in as a loss, and maybe now it's not. And then all of a sudden, like you can get Florida to 7 wins if you try hard enough, and I'm just curious if that's going to be enough to keep Billy Napier around. Y'all know by now, I've said it enough times, like that's the guy that I tabbed. I said, right, that's the guy I think that the LSU should go get. He's run a program, sustained success, didn't just do it with one quarterback or one class. He cycled them through and continued to win a lot of games at ULL. He knows the landscape of the state, can recruit well, been on Saban's staff, like he's called plays. Like, yeah, I'll take that guy. And it has not worked in Florida, as you well know. The question is, can he hang on for another year? And if they can find a way to beat LSU in the Swamp, they can find a way. I don't think they're going to beat Georgia, and I don't think they're going to beat Texas. And then LSU's next, so we'll see. But you can beat Florida State. Maybe. He can stick around, but we'll see. And then Brent Venables, 10-3 last year, looked pretty good, but that's a very interesting case because I think we spent more time focusing on Texas joining the league than we did Oklahoma. Texas felt like a bigger deal, but Oklahoma has been a bigger deal. Oklahoma has won the Big 12 half of their years in the league. And what we talked about a little bit in August after they joined the league, and I spoke to a guy that covers Oklahoma that day, was going, man, they've got astronomical expectations in terms of performance year in and year out and appearances in conference championship games. And nobody here really does that. Nick Saban did it, and Kirby Smart has done it. But nobody else gets to the championship game 3 out of 5 years. Like, that just doesn't happen. LSU's had a great program. Auburn has had great teams. Tennessee during their run. Dan Mullen. Mark Richt. A&M's never made it. Ole Miss has never made it. Like, it's hard to get there. And Oklahoma expects to get there all the time. Now, I'm not saying that Oklahoma should be okay with the season that Brent Venables is about to put out, which could be 1-7 in the league. But they need to come to grips with the fact that over a 10-year span in this format, they may not get to Atlanta twice. Now, you don't have to in a 12-team playoff anymore, but I'm just curious where Oklahoma will hold itself. That's always the discussion with hiring and firing coaches. What's your expectation? Because LSU's basketball coach and Kentucky's basketball coach don't have the same expectation. In the same way that Kentucky's baseball coach and LSU's baseball coach don't have the same expectation. Smoke Laval did what Nick Mingione did the last 2 years. Went to Supers and went to Omaha. Now, the program was really declining, but LSU fans despised that going to Omaha and losing 2 games. Kentucky fans throw a party. Y'all know this, but if you just bring it to Oklahoma football, like, what do they expect? This year, certainly not good enough. But what if he goes 5-3 next year and then 5-3 the year after that? Like, is that going to be okay? Or is that going to be, we got to fire the coach? I don't know. 1-7 is always going to fire the coach. But I'm interested to see how long Venables can hang there because he's got an offense he can't fix this year. So you're going to have to go into the portal and go hire a new offensive coordinator and fix that. But it's not a comfy feeling right now. And guess what? This is a brutal schedule they've got this year. It just flips next year. You still got to play LSU next year. You still got to play Texas next year. You still got to play Alabama next year. You still got to play Ole Miss next year. You still got to play Tennessee next year. Like, none of that's going anywhere. I think Florida's on their schedule as well. So, like, I mean, it's still going to be tough. And I would kind of bet against Venables being around at Oklahoma for a long time. So that's the hiring pool that LSU was in. Guys that are looking bleak, the guys at the big names, Lincoln Riley, Billy Napier, Brent Venables. LSU came away with Brian Kelly, who they've got in the top tier here of this list. It's hard to argue that, and the programs kind of speak for themselves at that point. If you want to read it, you can do so at On3. It's Andy's mailbag there on the On3 home page. Our Thursday shows are brought to you by Rouse's Markets, official market of the New Orleans Saints. We'll come back and close out our number one when we come back.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Boudreaux's Electrical Services. They're a certified Generac dealer, a premier Generac dealer. That means they're in the top 3% nationwide in Generac deals. Neil and Melissa have been running it for 40 years. You're not going to hear me talk about subscriptions with Boudreaux's Electrical or VIP membership requirements so you can pay more money to be treated well by the company. No, that's just part of the experience with Boudreaux's Electrical. Start that process. You have somebody come out, assess your situation, whether it's a commercial building or your home. And they come out, assess the square footage, what needs to be powered, how much wattage you need, and they go to work. They're going to get that generator that fits your needs. And depending on the type of generator that you pick, you get a 7 to 10 year warranty on that. It's going to be installed by a full-time Boudreaux's Electrical employee. They're going to do most of that installation underground. It's going to look nice, and it's going to give you the peace of mind of knowing that you don't have to worry about power outages. Those happen around here. Hurricanes happen, ice storms happen, summer thunderstorms happen. It's a nuisance at worst when the power at best when the power goes out. Boudreaux's Electrical can help you understand that that's not going to happen in your house or at your business. Check them out online, boudreauxelectrical.com, or give them a call. Same number they had for 40 years, 985-397-1562. That's 985-397-1562. Or in the 225 area code, you can find them at 300-9389. That is Boudreaux's Electrical.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Rouse's Supermarkets.
Closing up hour number one here on the Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Rouse's Markets brings you our Thursday shows each and every week. If you're looking to get a game watch party together to watch LSU and Texas A&M on Saturday night, get on by Rouse's. If you're watching the Saints on Sunday, get on by Rouse's. Whatever you need, they got all your wine and spirits, all your cold beer and seltzers. Also got sandwich trays, meat pie trays, got your steaks, burgers, ice, whatever you need to watch the game. Rouse's got you covered. Get on by any location in South Louisiana. If you're in South Louisiana, there's not a place you can be where there's not one pretty reasonably close. Rouse's Markets. This feels like home. All right, best win, worst loss on the board for college football in the NFL. Best win in college football, to me, Navy over Notre Dame. Navy is battling with Army and Boise State to be the top-ranked Group of 5 team, and it feels like Notre Dame would not be looked upon as favorably as the Boise loss to Oregon. So they need to win to remain in this conversation. And quite frankly, if you're an LSU fan, you need Navy to win because you've got to find a way to get Notre Dame out. If we think LSU is likely to be in the mix for an at-large, Notre Dame's a spot stealer. And you look at the rest of their schedule, it's the 2 service academies, Navy and Army, and then a trip to play Southern Cal and USC, and they're not very good. So I think Notre Dame's going to handle Florida State in South Bend. I think they'll handle Virginia in South Bend. You got Navy and Army, who I don't think are probably very good, and then you got USC, who's not very good. You got to find one loss. If you can get a loss to Northern Illinois and the service academies, you'll be in good shape. I think Notre Dame will be out because they don't have any great wins outside of Texas A&M, but it's got to happen, and I don't know that I've got a lot of confidence that it will. I think the best one on the board would be Navy in South. Oh, no, that's not in South Bend. It's in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Worst loss in college football, same thing. Stay in the same scene. Boise State, Friday Night Football at UNLV. Boise's got to run the table if they want to make the playoff. Got to beat UNLV. This is probably the best, most difficult spot on their schedule after Oregon. They played that game competitively. Ashton Genty needs this win to stay in the Heisman race. Boise needs it to stay in the college football playoff race. That would be the worst loss of the weekend, Boise State to UNLV. Best win in the NFL, I'll keep it in division. I'll keep it in the Saints division. The Falcons are at the Bucs, and the Bucs obviously took it on the chin, and the Falcons feel like they got a chance to win that division. The Saints have faded. The Panthers are a joke. These two teams feel like they're the cream of the crop in the division right now. And if the Falcons could go to Tampa and win, that would certainly tip the scales in their favor there. So I'll go best win on the board, the Falcons in Tampa. The worst loss to me, the Lions had a huge win last week in Minnesota, take control of that division. They're hosting 1-5 Tennessee, who stinks. Now, the Titans have a good defense. So if they can slow the Lions down, maybe they can go up there and stun them. But the Lions, I believe, are the cream of the crop in the NFC. And you can't lose to Tennessee, especially coming off of a really emotional win. So the emotional letdown spot, not as significant in the NFL. It's more workmanlike, more businesslike, and they're not as volatile as kids. So I don't think the Lions will have any issues. But I think that would be the worst loss in the NFL if Tennessee went to Detroit and won. Beck, I only want your thoughts on one of these because I don't think the others are that pertinent to LSU or the Saints. What's your confidence level Navy can play with Notre Dame?
Well, we talked about yesterday. I really, really think that the service academies, Army and Navy, to be specific, are really good this year. They've dominated all the teams they've played. Not to say the competition's been great, but usually it's not like that. And I think I talked about this with you off air. The fact that they changed the rules on cut blocking has forced the service academies to throw it more, and I think it's actually made them better because they can't be as one-dimensional, and the defenses actually have to account for it at times. So I like Navy's chances, man. I really do. I think it's going to be a close game. I'm not going to say they're going to win, but I think it will be a close game.
I sat through a Georgia Tech Navy Independence Bowl.
Oh, no.
And when Paul Johnson was there, and it was option on option.
Well, it was probably a short game at least.
It was, but they knew how to defend it, and no one could move the ball. It was bad. I was kind of excited about it to watch it in person. They couldn't move the ball. It was bad. That's going to do it for hour number 1 here on a Thursday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. When we come back, Travis Brown, Bryan College Station Eagle, talking Aggies. That's next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Evolve Physical Therapy and Sports. EvolvePT.com is the website. We know it. Pain sucks. Not fun at all. 1, it hurts. 2, it doesn't allow you to do the things that you want to do, whether that's work out, lift weights, walk, tennis, pickleball, youth sports, whatever the case may be. If you can't do that because you're in pain, you need to go see Evolve Physical Therapy and Sports. Robbie Bolton and his team are first class to work with, and they're going to be hands-on from start to finish, making sure you're getting the rehabilitation you need, you're hitting the goals you need to hit so you can get back to being your active self. That's their goal there at Evolve Physical Therapy and Sports. They've got first-class, state-of-the-art equipment there, and they've got an unbelievable staff that's going to help you from the moment you walk into the door, the second you leave, to make sure you can get back to being your active self. That's their goal. They're on Starring near Highland Road, right there next to Sammy's Grill. Starring near Highland Road. You can check them out online, EvolvePT.com. It's Evolve Physical Therapy and Sports. They're online at EvolvePT.com.